10th, 2013. I'm Benjamin Deniston. Joining us from Germany over Skype is Lyndon LaRouche. And in the studio with me is Creighton Cody Jones, who's going to open up our discussion. And this concept of the future is crucial. This idea that you have to respect the future as an efficient force. You know, because the irony that you really hit on with the difference of the animal system and the mammals versus mankind is if we don't create that future, it doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. You know, if people today don't view themselves as we could call the ambassadors of the future, if people don't view themselves today as acting on behalf of the future state that needs to exist and bring that into being, then it's not going to exist. Yeah. And as we've been discussing, it's guaranteed that life in the solar system is not going to last forever without mankind's action. Right. Whether it be a long period comet, whether it be the shutdown of the sun at some point in the distant future, whether it be changing galactic activity, that what we know for certain is true is that life just in a biological state is not going to be able to continue to exist. So if we don't move to this type of mode of action you're talking about mankind creating the capability within the entire inner solar system of managing and controlling this entire system of the inner solar system under man's dominion, then there is no basis for mankind's future. But I think what we really need to fight with people on is, where is that going to come from? If you just sit back and do nothing, is that just going to occur? Or does that require your action now to make that future a reality? Right. You know, where mammals might be being pulled forward by the larger process of the biosphere, mankind is willfully creative. Yeah. So where's your will? Is your will acting in that direction? Are you respecting the future for what it's going to be if you don't act, and versus what it needs to be and what you need to do to make that happen? You know, I think it really goes to this question of what do people identify with as more real? This day-to-day existence they're living in, how they feel with their life, what their daily sense-perceptual experiences are? Or do they actually have in their gut, in their soul, a real sense that my life, the only thing that's going to matter in my life is what new state, qualitatively new state, is going to be created as a consequence of the actions of myself and my generation, really. Right, right. And it is like you were discussing, this qualitative transformation. You know, mankind has to move to this entire new system of a platform into the inner solar system where you're moving towards thermonuclear capabilities, a much more interconnected and complex economy and productive process. But that requires the action of us today, thinking from the standpoint of what do we need to do now to continue to be step by step by step to achieve that goal a few generations from now.
The problem we have is that is not what the imperatives might be from inside the system to make progress. Right now, as a matter of fact, it's in a matter of days. We're on the edge of the extinction of the human species. And all of the things we might talk about that we could do are placed in jeopardy. Because if we don't change things from the way they're going now, in a very short period of time, there's not going to be a human species. And therefore, we have to look at this matter, we have to drive this process. If we don't drive the process, right now, the United States is in danger of a process of extinction. Now. Not down the line someplace. What we're doing in Europe right now, the same thing. Will Europe exist? Will continental Europe exist a week from now, or 2 weeks from now, or 3? We're having a conference here in Europe. And the question is, for the decisions that will be made in and around that kind of conference activity is going to determine whether there is going to be a future human species at all. We in the United States, we're faced with this president and what his policies are. His policies are going to cause genocide inside the United States if he stays in office. Mm-hmm. That's reality. Europe is in a similar situation. We're now on a complete breakdown process. And we have to get this thing going. And that's the driving. Now, for example, we also recognize with the solar activity and other kinds of galactic activity which we're experiencing now, or reflections of it, that we are in a situation where there is no guarantee of survival. If we actually, if you look back, there has been no net growth in the United States or in Europe. Since when? Since about the time of the death of a president of ours.
Yeah, Kennedy.
It was the last time we had actual net growth. We're talking about net growth. We don't have it. We say we have growth. We have improvement. We don't. More people in the United States are more stupid than ever before. This is not because they wanted to be stupid, but because the conditions of life imposed upon them dictated policies of practice, dictates forecasting views, which all led to this kind of destruction. And what we're dealing with right now, say this week, and going into the weekend and beyond, we're looking at the question of the extinction of civilization in Europe. We're also looking right now that if this president of the United States remains president and is not put in checks and balances very quick, there's not going to be a United States. So all the dreams about what we could do in the future are all up to question. There is no guarantee of the future. And just look at what nature's doing itself. Mm-hmm. Look at the increased threats. The activity, the solar activity and the galactic activity all add up to an acceleration of these kinds of problems. And we have to move fast on this. We have to get this current president under control. We've got to check him a great deal, take a lot of his power away. If we don't, we are not going to have a United States. And those are the questions which really are paramount here. And this part we see with the degrees of activity that we've seen, galactic activity and related activity. It's much more intensive now. The trend is much more intensive. So even on that modest front, things are working against us. And until mankind takes charge of mankind and launches the kind of progress which the British Empress is determined to prevent, we don't stop what this president is doing under the Queen's orders, there's not going to be a United States. There's not going to be a civilization. The Queen has said the population of the planet is to be reduced from 7 billion people to about 1, and a very rapid rate. We see what this president is doing under her orders right now. There's no promise for much survival in the United States. We can have a collapse of population in the United States very rapidly right now. All the preconditions are there. Look at the food supply, the agricultural system. Look at the other conditions. We're in a time that we really have to move ahead and get people not to promise them that we could do this and we could do that. We have to actually get at it and determine what we have to push now. Not what could happen to us, but what we have to push. We have to make the impossible possible. That's what it amounts to. And that's where we are.
Yeah, and it is the case that, as we've made the point numerous times, if you don't progress, you will die.
So really, it goes to what we've been discussing with needing to just completely eliminate and rid out the oligarchical system from society. What's been imposed over the last 30, 40 years is not just, because like you mentioned, you see it in cultural trends too. People don't have a desire to progress. They don't have an idea that there's no connection to the necessity of things like nuclear power, thermonuclear power as an absolute necessity for the existence of mankind. People have been conditioned to accept the idea of this whole green paradigm, which is nothing but self-extinction of mankind. The idea that we could reduce the population level, reduce the technological capabilities, is a commitment to saying we're going to eliminate billions of people from the planet. And how many people just accept that as the current state of mankind, that just what we need to do, just in the general population? You've had decades of this brainwashing and cultural degeneration, where, as you said, we need a total shift in the system, not just an attempt to get a little improvements here or there within the current paradigm. Which is, I think, why it's important that the conferences that we've been holding do have the unifying banner of a new paradigm, a new paradigm for mankind. You know, Helga announced these conferences under that concept. We need an entire new paradigm to replace this current situation. It's not just the effect of a few bad policies here or a couple bad decisions there, but it's the entire political, economic, and cultural outlook that's governed the world, really, for the past decade, which is failing. And if we don't come in with a whole comprehensive approach, there's going to be no solution.
And it was intentional. I mean, you look at the collapse of culture, that was intentional. You go back and read Adorno and others. They intended to bring about a cultural collapse, to go back to a culture of hedonism and no future. The economic collapse. I mean, we've indicated there was willful disintegration of the physical economy, of the industrial economy. So it hasn't been just a misguided policy here or a misunderstood idea. There was an intention to bring about that collapse, to destroy, you know, what we might term the American system, to destroy the remnants of the Roosevelt Revolution. It was intentional, and it has to be intentional to stop it as well. You got to intentionally put the brakes on it, as Lynn is indicating.
Yeah, and again, and as you open, the key to the whole thing, kicking out the whole thing, is this Glass-Steagall fight. Getting Glass-Steagall through to break the whole situation.
Yeah.
And then setting us up where we can come through with a real revival of an American credit policy.
Right.
Based upon things like NWAPA and this planetary defense and space exploration as the real drivers of progress. But if we don't start with overthrowing the entire financial system the way it exists currently and putting it through an orderly reorganization the way Roosevelt did it, nothing you try and do within the current framework is going to work.
Yeah. And maybe with that, we better get on our horse into D.C. today, where we can kick up some more of this dust and
Right. So, Lynn, do you have anything more before your weekend events?
I think that's the point. The point is that we are in a situation where the whole of humanity is in danger. In danger, really, of something approaching extinction, because that's where we are. And people have got to wise up, shall we say, and pay some attention to reality and stop worrying about cheap little side issues. The issue is to get this thing across and get people to wake up to what reality is. And that's where the problem lies. We're not getting that kind of realism, and we've got to push it.
All right.
I think that's clear for this week, and I'm sure we'll be having more from you the next couple days in this very important intervention in Germany this weekend.
Yes, looking forward to it.
As are we. Okay, well, with that, then I think that wraps it up for today. And